Hello, everybody, and here we are at What is Truth, episode 73. I'm John Barnwell here in Detroit, and I'm here with the Reverend David William Parry, alias Deerstalker. I guess is that what that's what that hat is. Okay, he's got a hat today. Well, that kind of throws me off. Where was I? Oh, yeah. That's right. We're pursuing truth. So he's stalking truth. That's what it is. And in light of where we've ventured lately and our attempt to approach truth, which of course is an ongoing process, a process of becoming rather than a process of being. And you can get entangled in the weeds with all the minutia that involves pursuing this, especially when you're off the cuff, as we are here. So, for any omissions and any time that one of us may have misspoken in some quotation or so forth, sorry about that. And that's all I'm going to say about that. But that's in light of a series of emails that I've gotten recently, and that's all I'm going to say. So today I'm going to let David lead the charge because I spent so much time preparing that there's so many prongs to what was going through my mind that I thought it'd be much fairer to Reverend David rather than just throw a bunch of things on his table and see what he thinks. So, Reverend David in the merry old England and the city of London, how are you there?
Okay, John. Series of emails. You'll have to tell me. I mean, people are quick to criticise, but not to pay. After all, we're doing this for the love of it. Put your hand in your pocket, love whoever you are, if you're going to start criticising. This is done out of goodwill and love and a genuine inquiry, not to cause problems. If you want to cause problems, be honest and open about it and say what the problem is, and you may be wrong. But I haven't seen them yet, so I can't say anything else. How am I? I can't remember the last time I thought it was merry England, let alone merry old England. It's certainly old England, in a maelstrom of problems at the minute, with everybody arguing about everything. But there we are. How am I? I felt like wearing my deer stalker today, and I've got my spyglass, of course, because we're still looking for truth. It's out there somewhere, as they say in the X Files. Gosh, how am I? I've just finished a rather long sermon, discussion sermon with the online Persian Christian Fellowship. I serve them once a month as one of the priests involved in that undertaking. They rather snootily reminded me that technically I should be father, so I might have to start readjusting my titles. I confess I have a sort of Wittgensteinian attitude to these things. Yes, I do think honorifics are important, but not the be all and end all. I think there is an important distinction between clergy and lay only because someone is called to a vocation, not because, which means you're the servant of people. If anyone ever says to me again, a prince of the church, I shall just explode. You mean a prince of the church founded by the guy that washed the feet of his friends? You mean that one? So we've got to get around that. Yeah, I mean, how am I? Wondering where liberal Catholicism, where independent Catholicism is going, where Europe's going, where Britain's going, where anthroposophy is going, and how we pull ourselves out of this incredible maelstrom, this incredible chaos of clashing opinions which don't seem to want to debate or discuss anymore. And that, for me, I suppose I'm a self-confessed child of the Enlightenment. On one level, I do believe in reason. I do believe in discussion. I don't believe in just laying claim to a particular turf and then defending it regardless. That's not the sort of heavenly powers I'm dealing with, because I stand in the tradition of people like Thomas Aquinas, who are really big on things like reason. But yeah, we've got the new venue for the next Nephilim Anthropology Conference. I wanted to take it to Edinburgh, that sort of Venice of the North, as they say, because my partner and I want to move there. It's interesting. I mean, I've got lots of contacts through the Edinburgh Festival. I was a regular at one point. The other hat I wear, of course, being British theatrical, and even that network couldn't help us. It appears to be something to do with the fact that you're allowed to be crazy for a month, but you're not allowed to be crazy after that month. And Calvinist sensibilities, if that's the word I'm looking for, whereby you had an open mind about biblical mysteries, didn't like the idea of a Nephilim anthropology. So we had nothing but rejections from every single venue. Some wouldn't talk to us at all. The one I find the most bizarre was the Sir Arthur Conan Doyle Centre up there, which basically, before I'd finished the email, had said no. I find that, my God, there's telepathy for you. Every single date I was just about to mention was busy. Come off it, please. That is not really the case. So we've had to move it back to London, in a rather ancient and haunted, in every sense of the word, part of the city. That will be on the 29th of October. Yeah, I mean, my partner's about to have a book out on the philosophy of education. What else? I'm finishing my next book, which Mr. Barnwell will be kindly prefacing, I hope. Yeah, I mean, I think in this country you remain happy despite yourself at the moment, with what's going on around you. And I'll just say one thing in an oblique way. Whatever happened to authorities that were known for their truthfulness or attempting to be truthful? I'm thinking of Parliament, but I'll use the BBC as my litmus test. When I was a boy, yes, Noah was getting out the ark. There were dinosaurs in those days, yada, 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 yada. Everybody knew what the BBC said was basically correct. That was when I was a boy, and it had its finger on a pulse. It was aiming for the truth, even if it couldn't always find the truth. And it was saying something important. I can't think of a single person in this country now that would say that about the BBC, that would say that about what is happening there. Is it only me that doesn't think life has to be a series of diminutions? And your thoughts too are haunting me at the moment. You said a couple of shows back that this wasn't the world round where people were good. That was the next one, and that's been on my mind for weeks actually. Along with what was it? Not Sartre, the Marquis de Sade. I have read the Marquis de Sade because I think you have to, if you're in my line of work. I think you've got to know what everybody's saying, and it was something. I mean, God, his theology is so simple nowadays. This great threat to the church in those days. I can't think of a first-year undergraduate in theology that couldn't give him a damn good pasting nowadays. History moves on. But it was, with him, it's always little things that sort of stick in your craw, as you Yankee boys say. If there was actually a good person who'd been born, everyone would naturally attack that person. And you think, oh gosh, there's something going on there. There's something very, very important that's been said there, even though it's quite difficult to pin down. So between your thoughts, anthroposophical thoughts, past readings, yeah, I'm beginning to think anthroposophy works on a much bigger plane, a more significant plane than I ever dreamed previously. And also, I'm beginning to see echoes and tints and shades of Abrahamism in every single page that I'm now devouring, which when it comes to anthroposophy. Various colleagues of ours, I noticed, seem to take a certain joy in attacking the founder. I find it very odd that now you can't discuss, if you even mention the word race, you're a racist. Isn't that a complete abandonment of discussion? I'm now going to mention the word sheep. It doesn't mean I'm against sheep. There we are. Rudolf Steiner. It's you again, Barnwell. You're having this terrible, inordinate effect on me. The sheer genius and output of that man. It's really quite difficult to measure and calculate. Did he ever sleep? Didn't he ever sit down and have an afternoon off? Book after book and lecture and art project and new scientific theory, incredibly inspiring. And the idea, I do hope it's Gnosticism still, even though some quarters of the church need to come out of the Middle Ages and get over their fear of that word. After all, it does only mean knowledge. I hope it is. But, okay, let's put it in Steiner's way. Certain people described the modern anthroposophical movement as, what was it, a cultural and intellectual movement? I think that's a very good one, actually. He would have described it, of course, as a spiritual science leading the individual spirit of a human being to the spirit of the cosmos, paraphrasing massively there. Yeah, isn't that beautiful? Isn't that a beautiful thought? I don't know why more people aren't getting more turned on, tune in, drop out, and turned on by those incredible thoughts, the depth and profundity of that undertaking. Okay, let's say he's entirely wrong. My God, and there's still an incredible depth and profundity and aesthetic to what he's saying. In which case, of course, he can't be wrong about everything. No, I'm beginning to be overwhelmed by those. My own work is suddenly taking a much more anthroposophical slant, which is not helpful because I've got deadlines. Can that happen after my present projects have been completed, please? That's not helpful at the minute. It just sounds like my CV. Victor Sobchak is staging some of my poetry, the 2 collections you've got on the stage as part of the Camden Fringe Festival in August. And I'm feeling, Britain could be doing so much better. And when did it turn into a country of mincing queens? I'm allowed to say that. Nobody else is, but I'm allowed to say that. I was thinking the other day, all those young people rushing off to World War I and II, with terrible catastrophes, and they should never have happened. But, and nowadays you mention anything and they're hiding behind a settee, a sofa. What is going on? What's happening? Is it all some secret global elite? I don't know. But I do know, as Hamlet says, there's something rotten in the state of Denmark. How about yourself, John?
Well, I wasn't planning on picking on Denmark today, so I think I'll take a pass on that, although I have a certain fondness for Danish culture, and to me, the leading representative would be Tycho de Brahe, who I've spoken about on numerous occasions here. But that being said, he's the astronomer, by the way, and Kepler was one of his students, and Kepler's the father of modern astronomy, and actually the father of modern astrology, but the astronomers don't like to share with you that part, because that's heresy. So, heretical thinking, we're all about heretical thinking. It doesn't hurt you to consider ideas that you disagree with. In fact, it empowers you, because you can't have a meaningful conversation with somebody unless you know what they're talking about. And which brings back this morning in the emails, I'm attempting to field vituperations from someone regarding Rudolf Steiner, and it's clear they don't even have cursory knowledge of Rudolf Steiner's work. So is that even fair? So I don't know. It's the kind of world we're living in, where you're not allowed to say certain things, and you can't discuss them. We're kind of left on our own, and below I've posted one of Rudolf Steiner's lectures, The Tasks of the Michael Age. It's from the volume Collected Works 233A. It was published as Rosicrucianism and Modern Initiation. And this is lecture 6 from it. And it's really such a weighty lecture. I think I'm going to let people take a look at it or not, and try and digest the content. And then at some future point, we'll drill down on it and go further than what I might say today. And that's that I just give you a measure of context. The spirit of Michael is the leader of this particular time period that we're in, the Age of Michael, as it's called in esoteric Christianity, which began in November of 1879. The countenance of Michael is, in Old Testament, he was the countenance of Jehovah Elohim, and he's currently representative and countenance of Christ, the solar logos that is indwelling earth since the mystery of Golgotha. If you've been listening to this podcast for any length of time, you probably already know that. But that being said, what does that mean? And Rudolf Steiner makes the point in this particular lecture that the previous regents of archangelic periods, Gabriel and Raphael and Uriel and so forth, that they're somewhat talkative, and that they are attempting to develop through active participation in culture, whereas Michael is taciturn, and that's that he stands back and watches what you do. So what are you going to do about it? And he's waiting, and the ultimate result of that being that you get some kind of nod or acknowledgement, a gesture of approval is pretty much the most you can hope for, because it's time now that we're supposed to be able to try and take our thinking and connect it to the world of spirit. And so much of what goes on in people's minds today, all of which is tied into the divisive content that people tend to run with, and they belong to this group and they're mad at that group, or I'm one of these and I'm upset with those people over there because they said this about that, and all this banter that is of no value whatsoever towards leading you toward an ingress into the content of the spiritual world. And I'm not saying that pompously. I'm saying it with the greatest humility that I stand before that challenge, and I'm humbled by the experience, because really at this point, more than any other point in history, it's up to mankind to make the decision about the way in which the future unfolds in Earth evolution. And so here we are. And I think, David, you were probably touching on when I said that the consciousness soul, of which the period that we're currently in, the 5th post-Atlantean period, which is the challenge of evil, that the consciousness soul is fundamentally antisocial in nature. And look around you, what's going on? There's all these internecine squabbles and territorial demographic arguments. It goes on because we haven't gotten to the point to where we're still early in this archangelic period, and especially in the age of the consciousness soul, that has the mission to be transforming the consciousness soul into the spiritual soul. And so obviously, just in watching the way people behave on a daily basis, you'd say we have a long way to go. And so that's the context, Reverend David, that I think that you might be looking for. And that is the point, is that you say, well, what is abstract thinking? And Rudolf Steiner says, basically, it's a corpse of your pre-earthly existence. It's like, okay, think about that for a few months and come back and tell me what you think. But if you look at it and you look at the underpinnings of that, you see that's essentially astoundingly true. And that the challenge, that Michaelic challenge, is that we're supposed to imbue with the warmth of feeling. That's that heart force, and imbue our thinking with that heart force. And that's why Rudolf Steiner made recourse to the arts, because it's much easier for somebody to be able to bring into their soul life these feelings of warmth. And since that's the challenge, because we're on the path towards becoming freedom, spirits of freedom and love. And as I've said on many occasions, wisdom without love can be brutal. And so it's always within that context that we should strive to meet these challenges, and that's why it's so difficult. That's because we're like a bunch of crying babies when it comes to our little domain of identification. I don't want to get into too many details, because apparently you're not even allowed to address those challenges. So I don't know. It seems to me like that's fundamentally antisocial.
I can beat that. During the week, I was told I was an overly woke prat. So one minute I'm a fascist, now I'm overly woke. I'm enjoying the overly woke bit. I got a round of applause and a pat on the back for that one. I don't know what it means. I'm not quite sure what it was that I said to make me overly woke prat. So,
maybe that's a shower cap.
Well, oh, no, how dare you? I love this. I love shower caps too, but there's a different story.
Or a nightcap.
Well, oh God, there was, when I was playing Generally Volgin in Victor Sobchak's The Idiot, because there were two phases. I mean, The Idiot is an incredibly complex novel, right? And you have Generally Volgin as the old gentry that's losing power and money and influence. So I played him as a dipsomaniac. He's losing his cash as a dipsomaniac in the first part of the play. And then I was reading the text, John.
You might want to define dipsomaniac, just so people can share in your laughter.
Sorry, he was a boozer. He wouldn't stop drinking because he was losing his position in Russian society. And Angela Price played my wife, who was constantly tut-tutting to the audience because I was picking up bottles here, there, and everywhere and putting them down again. It was called acting, And the other part of the past the intermission, I realised when I read the book again, they must have been suffering from what we call nowadays post-traumatic stress, which of course hadn't been coined as a concept in those days. So even the astonishing Dostoevsky couldn't label it. And I thought, oh my God, he's actually reacting to some sort of wound, some sort of spiritual wound. So I played him in the second half, dressed as Wee Willie Winky, with this long nightcap and nightgown, and rushing onto stage with my candle in my hand. Anyway, but there my hands are different. You got me worried about what people are saying now. I can think of something St. Ambrose said. No one heals himself by wounding another. That's always good to remember with these sanctimonious and self-righteous people who feel the need to correct others by emails. And who put you in that position, love? Yeah, who are you? Um, you know, I don't remember voting for your public office. Keep it to yourself. I mean, yeah, I like the overly woke Pratt because, as I said, I'm not quite sure what I said, but it must have been good. And I think it was something because I was defending gay people again. Hey, it's my job, yeah. But I defend other groups too, so it's not just us lot. And I don't know, so it must have come from that somewhere along there. It makes a nice change from accusations of being extreme right wing, which is also not true. But it makes a pleasant change, I must admit. Oh no, let's turn our thoughts to love. I mean, I don't know who's attacking you, whoever they are needs to remember the spirit of discussion. I mean, this entire show is based on the premise that discussion is healthy and enlightening, as indeed is the past 2,000 years of Western civilization. So we've got a lot of people behind us, including the philosophers. I mean, I'm now thinking of people like Diderot, who I also admire, that said, without discourse, life is meaningless, something along those lines. Um, Voltaire, I don't agree with what's being said in there, but I defend with my life the right to say it. I don't quite know where silencing people is leading, apart from a cultural revolution similar to that which took place in China under the Red Guard. The Cultural Revolution, of course, was a bloodbath. Let's not sanitize. I'm obsessed in many ways with Chinese history. I think China is an incredibly superior culture. It's forbidden to use that as a phrase now. But why not? Why can't we use that as a phrase? I mean, let's remember when people were silenced and weren't allowed to say their own truth or the truth as they saw it. Those are two different things. I mean, the Khmer Rouge in Pol Pot's Utopia, the killing fields where people, if they didn't shut it, were basically murdered, or Stalinist Russia underneath the tyranny, or indeed the French Revolution, keep it shut or die. And as I say, that modern wonderful manifestation, Maoist China, apparently we're all meant to look up to it now. I can't quite work out why, because that was a bloodbath from beginning to end. Am I saying there aren't bloodbaths amongst the right wing? No, there are things like Auschwitz. Both sides are equally bastards. But the point is, if anybody starts to silence anybody else and isn't listening to make a discussion, that's when the problem starts. I'm thinking of Northern Ireland as a case in point. Some of my family is actually from Northern Ireland, not that distant. And it was where the Catholic voices in Northern Ireland felt they could say nothing. And if anyone wants to argue with me about that, I've got actual biographical testimony from people in my family who can say, shut up, because this is what happened. It's when people aren't allowed to say, they aren't allowed to speak for themselves, they aren't allowed to verbalize. And then, of course, social discourse is reduced to next to nothing. That's when the trouble really starts. And it may not be in the immediate, it may not be in the interim, but it explodes the longer it's kept under control. I mean, that's one of those new Marxist things, and I do mean the neo-Marxist. I've got you'll hate this, John. I've got a soft spot for your classic Marxists, to be honest. All these huge books and you're slicing into everything. Chapter 47, and now we get to the new economy. You want to say something, John? Yeah, I remember reading the prison notebooks by Gramsci, chapter 49, and why you've got to understand the hegemony. With me thinking I can't stand much more of all this, but surely that is inviting discussion. All of that. Surely that's what the revolutionaries were trying to do. Surely that's what the avant-garde has always prided itself on. And I'm deeply suspicious of those people that put themselves in positions of authority in an attempt to close discussion down. Shame on that person, whoever they are.
Well, that's yes. I was considering earlier today because Rudolf Steiner he starts talking about what happens when you, and it's a process that is coming out of the Rosicrucian stream, is that to take modern science, and he gives the example of Haeckel, and most people in modern education, they don't even know who Ernst Haeckel is, but Ernst Haeckel is really in there with Charles Darwin and evolution, and he's like a zoologist, a naturalist, philosopher, but he's also a eugenicist, by the way. And so it's kind of a dicey subject, yes.
I find this modern Protestant tendency that everybody's got to be perfect in every way vaguely ridiculous. There's no point in history amongst any nation or any ethnic group ever where, excuse me, every single person has been virtuous in every way. I think that's ludicrous.
Yes, you're speaking to the choir. Okay, now that we've addressed that point, you have to qualify statements before you make them so somebody doesn't get upset. But anyways, Ernst Haeckel. So Rudolf Steiner, people don't know this, but Haeckel was considered Rudolf Steiner to be potentially his protege, right? And Steiner had edited Goethe's scientific works, and really the concept of Darwinian evolution and all of that is an attempt to take the concepts of metamorphosis and apply them to nature and the whole process of the evolution of species and the origin of species and all that kind of thinking. And it's kind of funny, actually, because Ernst Haeckel's considering Rudolf Steiner the brilliant young scholar to be his protege and carry on his work. And then all of a sudden, out of the blue, Rudolf Steiner starts doing these lectures on what would come to be known as anthroposophy or spiritual science. And it's like, in the words of the Brits, Ernst Haeckel was gobsmacked. He couldn't believe it. And so he took back his view that Steiner should be his protege. And it was clear that wasn't going to be the case. And Rudolf Steiner makes the point of that we should be able to, in this Michaelic age, take things such as the studies of natural science, and that we need at this point to take them reverently to the spiritual world. And in offering it that way, we can receive insights that are the result of the unsolvable nature of sense-bound thinking, and that is the domain of natural science that has so much of value to contribute, but because they have a missing component, they don't believe in the world of spirit, or they don't even believe in the world of soul, for that matter. Most of the exponents that you find today. And in fact, they had a convention in Arizona of materialist atheists that Leo Zagami was talking about. I won't even give them their official name. I won't even honor them with what they think they're doing, because it's beyond the pale. So, but anyway, so I hate getting embroiled in all this polemic, but nonetheless, that's the world in which we're living. We're living with the unrefined aspects of the consciousness soul being fundamentally antisocial. And so it's divisive. It wants to deal with measure, number, and weight and chop things up. And like Lord Verulam, Francis Bacon says, torture the sacred, torture the secrets out of Mother Nature. It's like, it's kind of a vicious way of looking at it, but that's essentially what they're doing. And the way in which they're doing it is taking this kind of embalmed thinking that is expressing out of the pre-earthly existence. But what has to happen is they have to take that stream moving out of the future and imbue that with warmth, and then take these ideas and bring them to the spiritual world, to the hierarchies, and see what happens in your dream life. And so you'll find that many of us, many of the greatest inventions have come out of dreams. You can go back and study the history of inventors, and so often is the case, they talk about how they had a dream and it helped them solve one of their problems. So that there's a reality there. It's not just a result of something that you ate.
Well, if they all had a meeting in Arizona, we've all got to have a meeting in, what's that place where the New Age guys congregate? I was always going on about it. Oh, God, Sedona. We've got to have a meeting in Sedona where the elite go. Oh, gosh, I never know what to... Meetings and meetings and meetings. I rather like conferences that get together to try and explore things, not to shut things down. That strikes me as a political more than a cultural and intellectual move. I confess I'm conflicted about the word abstract, because that depends what you mean. I mean, I'm one of the aficionados of abstract art, and I'm thinking of basically Hilma of Klimt, who probably started the whole process way before someone like Kandinsky, who was convinced she was in touch with supernormal powers, which she tried to paint. That is what you call heroic. And that is the birth of the abstract movement in art. You know, how on earth do you paint stuff like that? So there are colors, there are shapes, and they're very satisfying, and they're very telling, and they're very, I don't know, that sometimes they're like icons. I mean, I remember the first time I went to see Rothko, there were some of his panels. I mean, it's for a restaurant. There's some of his red panels. Oh gosh, where was that? Tate Britain, Tate Modern. They had a sort of exhibition years back, and I noticed, me included, every time you went into the central room of the exhibition where the red columns were, people would naturally start whispering, because it was like entering a cathedral. It was like entering, you know, a solemn presence in a church. It was like a chancellery. And that was spontaneous. No one was saying, clam up and keep it down. People were naturally doing that. So I confess to being conflicted, and I'm always aware there's more than one meaning to words like abstract. Although what you said a minute ago strikes me as extraordinary, because of course one would have had direct spiritual perception before birth of whatever realities were surrounding one. Therefore, that's remarkable. But I don't. Sometimes a diminution or an encasing isn't necessarily a completely bad thing. It might be sort of a transitional thing, like a pupae, like a cocoon that eventually allows a butterfly to break free. You know, just because something appears to be negative doesn't mean it's ultimately negative. I remember reading, since free flow, Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. Think I brought that up on this show before, because of somebody's on TV. Someone said read it, and their analysis was correct. I mean, the first 7, can't remember now. The first 8 chapters are just dull as dishwater. And then all of a sudden, one of the most important books anyone is ever going to read explodes into your face. So that's like the pupae, that's like the cocoon. that leads the butterfly to escape. I noticed Gaia TV has ripped that idea off. You've got a group of people on motorbikes going through the Himalayas, up to a hidden guru who is teaching them how to live the Dharma and find transcendence. Oh, that's a bit like Zen in the Hut. But there we are. We've all got to make a crust. And also it looks fascinating. I shall watch it too. Yeah, we've got to be aware of what's happening, but why it's happening as well. I think my trouble with the type of reductive discourse that you're describing, I mean, Gabriel Marcel, as I said before, there are two ways of looking at life. You either have the scientific attitude that it's a problem. I don't know what you mean by life being a problem. In other words, it's not completely analysed yet. I mean, what a bizarre thought. Why would it need to be? And what does it lead to? Those are scientific questions as well. And I noticed some people were trying to shut Rupert Sheldrake down recently because there is no such thing as telepathy almost a priori. But that isn't science. Science is the bit that asks the questions, not the bit that silences arguments. That's not science. But that's science becoming a belief system, which is not the same thing. You've already given up the ghost of the sciences the minute you've done that. And if you want a belief system masquerading as science, bully for you, but it's not science. Right, I'm free flow at the minute. Forgive me, John. One of my favourite South Park episodes. Yes, I'm sorry, I'm a degenerate. I watch them from time to time. My second favourite one is about Barbara Streisand, who's a Japanese monster determined to be the most popular and well-known entertainer in human history. That scored a point with me. The other one is where they seem to be in the future, and the scientists who are always saying things like "science be praised." So, in other words, that's become their religious vocabulary, but they absolutely are adamant it's not. Are fighting a war with the United Atheist Alliance about what can be said and what can't be said. And it is that awful fat boy, Cartman, is that his name? Who says to one of the science people, "Oh, for God's sake," or something like this. And you get this sort of condescending attitude from the science guy. "Oh, you believe in some sort of higher being," when of course, they're eulogizing what the sciences are in their lives. Sorry, John, you wanted to say something. You wanted to say something? No, okay. So, it's all vocabulary. I mean, the Wittgensteinian bit in me loves the vocabulary bit, but not the bit about being silenced. I mean, what at the end of the day is anyone who's into scientific reductionism, scientific materialism, a linguist? What is the master science? Linguistics, sociolinguistics, cultural linguistics. Therefore, I don't like your particular language game, so I'm shutting it down. But that's ludicrous. It means you haven't understood what's going on in the first place. It's a discussion with its own rights and its own wrongs, and absolutely no right to silence or interfere with another language game with its own rights and its own wrongs. That's just what happens. That's called being human. I don't know who's writing this stuff to you, but I suspect they need a bigger education. And there's nothing wrong with that. Read a few extra books, look into a few forbidden areas, get transgressive, nothing wrong with it either. But I do think we've got to, I don't know, remember the spirit of Western culture. Is that forbidden now? And if it is, let's look at the alternatives. I mean, they're not that inspiring. Anyway, I'm rambling. What do you think, John? I've said a couple of things.
Yeah, well, it's that old saw, isn't it? And we're just here having our little chin wag, and people that get up in arms about it, okay, get over yourself. Anyways, I like that. I agree with Oppenheimer. Everywhere there is a desert used to be a city. Yeah, and so here we are. These things tend to turn on themselves. And well, that was a good one. I didn't know he said that. I like that. And if you look at the Gobi Desert, that's the former culture center of the migration from Atlantis, right? Referred to now as Shambhala. Of course, Shambhala has since retreated into the, well, you're saying that, but that's Agartha. That's a different story altogether. No, I'm talking about Shambhala. Yeah, Shambhala is like the New Jerusalem, essentially. It's a kingdom that's not of this world. And but that being said, so I guess what I wanted to try and share today, and I realized it was a bit much to try and expect people to be able to follow it, and so I'm going to have to dole it out in little pieces, episode by episode. So if you don't stick around, you won't find out the punchline. How's that for a lead in? And but that being said, it at this point is probably a good time to share with you that we have here Reverend David William Parry. He's the author of The Grammar of Witchcraft, which is a Shakespearean study, and it's not a how-to book, as I always say. And his Shakespearean-esque poetry, Caliban's Redemption, and his major work, which could be superseded by one of the new books he's writing right now. I don't know, because I haven't seen them. But his major work at this point is Mount Athos Inside Me, Essays on Religion, Swedenborg and the Arts. And that's edited by the very talented Daniela Irendust. And those books are available on Amazon. And I recommend you pick them up. And as for myself, I am the author of 2 volumes. One is 640 pages, the Arcana of the Grail Angel, the spiritual science of the Holy Blood and of the Holy Grail, study developed out of the work of Rudolf Steiner of the underground streams of esoteric Christianity, which flowed from the Brotherhood of the Holy Grail to the Order of the Knights Templar and the True Rosicrucian Order, as a forward by my best buddy Douglas Gabriel of American Intelligence Media, and extensive diagrams. And the whole series of diagrams is repeated in my 2nd volume. And there's a great many more added. And in these diagrams, I give you a cosmological basis to understand some of the things that we attempt to approach here. And I'm kind of slowly moving through it so people can actually read and see what they're about. But in taking cosmology, the approach like the Gospel of Mark, which is essentially cosmological in nature, at least according to the perspective that's presented by Rudolf Steiner, you see that we live within a universe of beings and forces. And to the extent to which we can awaken a heartfelt understanding of these beings and forces is the extent to which we're going to be able to creatively, artistically move into the future and create a better world for ourselves and others, hopefully. And so in getting into like what you were saying about abstract, it's good I didn't forget that you said that, because you say you're not quite sure how that fits in. Well, you mentioned Vasily Kandinsky, who was the author of the book Concerning the Spiritual in Art. And it's a seminal work within abstract art. But what a lot of people don't realize is that Kandinsky actually attended lectures of Rudolf Steiner and was very much influenced by Rudolf Steiner's ideas about art and color and so forth. And the whole idea of that in abstracting, taking something, taking an element of subject matter and presenting that element to try and embody something that can lead you into getting the feeling and the tendency of whatever it is you're representing without overly defining it. And so that could be both ways, because you can go in kind of a dark direction, for example, when you get into like Picasso. He's actually quite dark if you go back to what he says about his own work. He looks upon his paintings as magical talismans to where he can control the world. It's like, I mean, that's like, I'm sorry, that's a little bizarre for my taste. Or you can go and see somebody who's tending in that direction, like Vincent van Gogh. And Vincent van Gogh, the remarkable power of his paintings. I don't know if you've ever if you're ever given the opportunity to see Van Gogh's paintings in person, please do it, because it's an astounding experience. See, you can look at him in a book and you go, yeah, guy's quite clever. He never made a dime off his paintings, and now they're the most valuable paintings on earth, perhaps, of ones that occasionally come up for sale. For the other ones that never go up for sale, who knows? But I've mentioned before, and I keep mentioning it because it astounded me when I ran into one of his self-portraits in the Detroit Art Institute. It was just a small painting, and I'm just walking in it, and when I looked at it, it was like a bolt of lightning hitting me. And it brings to mind what Rudolf Steiner said about great works of art. He said, don't just look at the painting, but try to get a relationship to the inspiration that the artist was receiving to paint the painting. And that's what's profound about art. And so when Kandinsky's saying concerning the spiritual in art, that's what he's getting at. I feel is that, and there is that, and you see certain artists that feel as if there's something sacred about what they're doing, and it's just something truly remarkable. And you'd have to say that, especially in music, it's easier to try to conceptualize the actual creative process, like when you get into like Mozart. And I've told the story before, but I'll tell again because it's so relevant. It's that Beethoven in Conversations with Eckermann, he's talking about the difference between Mozart and Beethoven, and he reaches into his desk and pulls out the actual manuscripts of sheet music that was handwritten by Mozart, and then another one by Beethoven. And you look at Mozart, it's perfectly neat. It's just like he's taking dictation. He's just jotting down, stream of consciousness, working quickly, but nonetheless all neatly drawn, no corrections or anything. And then he shows Beethoven's, and there it is, and it's got stuff roughly crossed out. There's coffee spilled on it. There's smears and smudges, and you can see the battle that's going on within the soul of Beethoven as he's trying to create these works. But then if you look back at his works and you see to where he has layers, polyphonic layers of melodic themes, it's just, how do you do that? I mean, how do you conceptualize that? And it's actually, in what we know of him, that he was really struggling with dictation, but it didn't come through as clear, perhaps for him, or that he fought and he disagreed with what the spiritual world. No, I think it'd be better to you know, put in a seventh here and then a passing chord. Don't you think that he's arguing, having an argument with the spiritual world through his music? And which is ironic considering that he was going deaf, and of all people to go deaf, it's like they picked the wrong guy. But maybe that made his music greater, so there's so many unanswered questions, and a lot of times it's best to leave questions unanswered. As like I refer to in my first book, I refer to them as soft, unsolved questions. That you have to have that, because that's that movement, that's that striving, the unfolding thing. The big problem with the scientism that's running around today is like, you don't believe in science. Well, first of all, science is not a belief. Second of all, science is a process. They come out with a new book every year. This is the definitive science today. Next year, they got a new version. And like, as I said before, they're not going to need a new version of Beethoven's Ninth Symphony. It's finished. It's just the way it's supposed to be. And so it's that whole idea of closure that is the big bugaboo with the abstract intellect. It wants closure, and has an innate striving to try and resolve the issue of happiness in this world. Whereas in earlier generations, they didn't expect to find fulfillment in this world. That there's always that element of that the spiritual world has to be involved in order for there to be a sense of fullness in one's life. And so that now you get this whole dilemma of the various social movements that are attempting to try and rectify past wrongs. And, well, yeah, but you said this about that. And these people, 200 years ago did this, and they said that they belong to your team. And so therefore you're guilty too. And it's a big word salad, and won't do you any good. You're not going to get closure just dealing with sense-bound concepts. What you're going to get is conflict, and that's that tendency. Again, we're going back to when you say that the consciousness soul is fundamentally antisocial. What do you mean by that? Well, I just explained to you what I mean by that. It has this desire for closure. And it's trying to work with a closed system. But as we know from our previous conversations, I like to work with the open system. And by that, I mean is that when you take knowledge and you attempt to formulate an idea, I like to assume that there's things I don't know, that there's elements playing into the equation that are beyond my ability to perceive, and therefore I have to leave the door open so that newness can come in. And it's that newness that's going to give us that sense of purpose to keep continuing in our quest. And what is a quest but a question?
Gosh, where do I start with that? I start with finishing something I was saying a minute ago. Gabriel Marcel, yes, I love the existentialists. He was probably the only Christian existentialist. I think there are real reasons why Tillich is not a Christian existentialist, but that's something else. There are two ways of looking at life: a scientific way, because it's a problem. In other words, everything is much more explanatory, but you've actually lost so much in human life that is it a description of human life anymore? It's been denuded to such an extent that it's actually not recognizable. Or you have a more spiritual, cultural, aesthetic approach, whereas it's not as precise and it's not as clear, but that somehow rings truer to a description of human life. I think that's incredibly important. I mean, Kierkegaard was also working on that basis. You can't leave things out. You can't cherry pick, and you can't have one faction dominating other factions. You can't have reason and the church of the rationalists, as it was in those days, telling everybody there's no such thing as trauma, there's no such thing as crisis, there's no such thing as dread, and so on and so on and so on. In terms of Van Gogh, I mean, of course, people tend to forget he was a minister, he was a pastor who was actually forbidden by his church to speak about about what he wanted to on a Sunday. And he actually ended up saying, if I'm not allowed to preach, I will put those passions into my paintings. I'm paraphrasing that rapidly because there's a whole raft of assertions there. But so he was preaching through colour and insight into nature. I mean, that tends to be forgotten. Therefore, the whole process was religious to him. I rather like Kandinsky saying they're talismans. Why are we afraid of controlling the whole world? Surely he means his own. You know,
No, not Kandinsky. That was Pablo Picasso. What did I say? Kandinsky?
Sorry, yeah. Yeah,
but I misspoke.
Yeah, the point holds. I mean, I remember that now. Sorry. Why not? Why not? I mean, the greatest artist, arguably in human history, who exhausts naturalism when he's in his mid-teens. You know, people that don't like his art need to look at the notebooks and need to look at the history of the man. He'd exhausted everything that the classical tradition had to do and say by his early 20s. I mean, you know, this isn't a usual man. This is a man on fire. And therefore he tries to paint psychology. He tries to paint spirituality. And I can sympathize with that statement, right? So he's controlling his own world. He's controlling the world of his interactions and with other people around him and his culture. Does he mean he's got some sort of Hitlerian, you know, magical device to raise armies? I doubt very much he means that, because that wasn't where he was coming from at all. Do I think that's an important enterprise in the arts? Yes. I mean, I'm thinking of one of my own heroes. Picasso is a hero of mine, as indeed Picasso, Kandinsky, Van Gogh, all of them. If I'm thinking of theatre and oh God, and his name's completely gone at that moment, Arto, who wanted to stage shamanic rituals. That is not a trivial aim. And of course, I mean, the Freudians of his day were very wary of that and intrigued at the same time. And you can see crossovers and parallels and marriages between thought systems. I mean, these are, you know, he felt people had forgotten what theatre was. Therefore, you go back to the primary, you go back to the enactment that entire communities used to do in the ancient world. The Eleusinian mysteries in ancient Greece were performed by the community, not a couple of major players, not a few priests. The priest guided it all, but it was the whole community that participated in the enactment of the mystery. How else could it work if you begin to think about that? If it's only to do with you and you're not a Picasso, then no, you're not participating in the mystery. You're participating in a religious fantasy, which is yours, and good on you, but it's no more than that. I've just been reminded of something Diderot said, since he's on my mind at the minute. It was something along the lines that the truth or freedom won't happen until the last king has been strangled with the entrails of the last priest. I hope he doesn't mean me. He can step outside and say it. You know, do I agree with that? No. Do I applaud the sentiment behind that? Of course I do. What is he talking about? Those invested authorities that will do next to anything to silence debate. People tend to forget what the philosophers had to deal with, which is why they've always been some of my favorite human beings. Point one, they weren't atheists, they were deists. Point two, therefore they did believe in something, which is more than most modern people can say, who believe in absolutely nothing, who are afraid to actually face a belief in case they're wrong. Please give me a break. Although they embrace fantasy, right, are the Marvel comics really going to improve your life or give you a sort of escape for a couple of hours? I mean, it's the latter, isn't it? Iron Man's dead. Big deal. Let's resurrect him in the next comic. It means nothing. It's called fantasy. It's glamour. It's a entertaining waste of time, as the pop song used to say, and nothing else. Are you a better person because of it? No. Are you enlightened? No. Do you know more about the world? No. You've made a lot of money if you're Stan Lee. Sorry, John. Yeah.
I didn't know you were a snob. It's okay. I've known a few literary snobs in my life. That's fine. I don't know. I found value in the world of comic books in my personal life for my young years. It was probably unwholesome things happening to me that I didn't realize at the time. You're raising your finger. Either there's one or you want to say something.
No, I'm not a snob, believe it or not. And I used to read Marvel comics too, although I preferred Astounding Stories and those little comic books because they were actually intriguing. And I used to watch Outer Limits, Twilight Zone. It was less to do with unadulterated personal. I'm just about to use a rude word. I mustn't use that word. A certain type of self-pleasuring, which the modern genre just seems to do. I mean, I love the comic books of what's the British guy's name again? Alan Moore, and I still read them. No, I like DC Comics as well. Do I think? I mean, it's becoming an ersatz religion. What I like, there's room for everything. There's a show in London called The Lion King. I think it comes from the States. It's every right to play. It's every right to get busloads of tourists, though it's a bit cheap saying that's the theatrical experience in London. Going there every night. What I object to is it then saying it's art. No, you're not. You don't deserve the funding of the arts. You're popular and you're entertainment, but you're not art. What I object is to things stopping other things being performed, being said, being enacted, being expressed. No, if I compare The Lion King to anything by Arto and the theatre of anger, the theatre of contempt, no, it's not art. So no, am I a snob? No, but I don't like this sort of need in certain areas of our modern culture, normally by accountants, of course, to push, say, the Marvel experience as this overarching phenomena for life generally. No, they're comics. They make a couple of nice movies, good effects, crap storylines normally. No, it's all a bit of fun. And I don't even limit the genre of the comic. As I say, I love Watchmen by Alan Moore. And you can never pull back from him. I mean, he was a practicing ceremonial magician. He actually excuse me, says on the grapevine he still is. I'm loosely connected to that grapevine, very, 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 very loosely, but he still is. I mean, he used to practice the higher and lower keys of Solomon. I believe, listening to what people are saying, he's done things like Abramelin the Mage, heavy waters, deep waters, heavy waters. And if you ask him, did anything happen? He will say they were spectacularly successful, way beyond anything he'd originally thought. And a lot of that material goes into the comics. Therefore, they're not just comics. They're not just personal pleasuring. All of a sudden, you're looking at something else and something actually quite disturbing and enlightening at the same time. I'm trying to remember other comics that he did. I know Watchmen, and I know some of them are, League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. I even love the movie. I normally hate movies of comics, particularly graphic novels, but I believe he did that. And again, you're looking at well-known characters completely remolded and revisioned to get concepts clashing with each other that may not even have been aware in the original, excuse me again, in the original masterpieces they come from. So am I a snob? You don't get me on that this time, John. No, I just like the correct boundaries. If I go to the Avengers as a movie presentation, great, and let's have a burger afterwards and maybe a beer. But it's not the same as Knock Theatre in Japan, where you have to sort of get your mats, get your straw mat for 3 days and hope for the best because it's just overwhelmingly beautiful. No, so all I'm saying is it's not the same.
Well, yeah, apples and oranges. I mean, far be it from me to say that Eminem's on a par with Beethoven. But he's talented at what he does. But, and that being said, you can go back to, who was it? I forget that now, the record producer. But he said, well, first of all, music is melody, harmony, and rhythm. And so if what you're doing doesn't have those elements, is that what you're doing? Are you doing music, really? And basically talking rhythmically over some kind of soundtrack, it's a borderland. It's pop culture is what it is. And it has its place for the people that it's relevant for. I'm going to leave it at that. It's difficult because when you get into what we're talking about here, there's this struggle that's been going on, and I got into a conversation about this the other day with Douglas Gabriel and Tyler and Michael McKibben. We were talking about these things, and I. They called me regarding a subject that I don't want to get into now because it's, first of all, because it would be so interesting that we'd have to go beyond our time slot. But just being said, I said that the roots of the struggle that we're going through at this time, I could chase it all the way back to ancient Egypt and ancient Babylon and Persia. That there's it's the whole struggle surrounding the mysteries of the Grail, which is the mystery of Golgotha, the incarnation of Christ. And then what you have elements that were in existence before the incarnation of Christ, the ancient mysteries and so forth. And there were beings, specifically because we're recapitulating now the ancient Egyptian period, as the third period is recapitulated by the fifth, so that it's the angels of the Egyptian period that are the inspiration behind the drama that we're going through at this time. And there are the angels that are the wholesome angels that have aligned themselves with the Christ impulse, and then there are those that are opposing it. And that's the struggle. And within that, you have to include that whole idea of scientific materialism and reductionism, and that whole idea of that man is just a walking, talking meat suit, and that there is no soul and there is no spirit. And so people that they're convinced of the reality of that, well, they run around and they get in conflict with each other about the minutia of that worldview. And so what are you going to say? You're either going to be able to convince them to look further or not. And at this point, you're not even allowed to do that. So it's becoming pretty interesting, the terrain we're getting into. And I think it'll probably get worse before it gets better, given the prognostications of many people that are much smarter than I am. Oh, by the way, speaking of missions, I forgot to mention that my books are available on eBay. And if you'd like to contribute a cup of coffee or or anything for that matter, even $1 is helpful. That is paypal.me/DPARRY777 for Reverend David. And for myself, it's paypal.me/John Barnwell 888. And so, in appreciation to so many people that have contributed over the time period that we've been doing this, it's really heartfelt. There's, of course, Tyla and Vadim and Vivian lead the list because they're the most consistent and contributed the most. But then there's Christian and Druvman, I don't know how to say that, Laura, Paula, Rick, and so many, many others over the years. But I really want to thank those people that have actually stepped up to contribute, and also to the people that have purchased our books. And I hope that it's helpful for them. But I never bothered to tell people, the challenge in reading my books is that you have to be able to internalize the content, such as is in the diagrams, so that you can breathe life into it. It's not enough for it to just be the dead letter on the page. And in fact, so much of the world in which we live today is a result of the dead letter. And the printing press was invented by Ahriman anyways. So there you have it. GoFundMe, no, I don't go there. They tend to like to have opinions about who gets to participate. And so that's not my club. I don't know. It's getting to the point to where it's going to be difficult to do most anything. So I don't know how long this is going to continue, but I hope that everybody is getting their inner life situated so that they can have sufficient forces of soul and spirit in their life to be able to weather the storm, whatever that may be. Because it's going to go up and it's going to come down. Things are going to get better, then they get more challenging, but all you got to do is every 5 years I like to do an assessment. Really, it's every 7 years, and I could never have imagined in my wildest dream that I'd end up doing what I'm doing. And so karma's like that. It takes us to places that we wouldn't have gone to voluntarily. And so that's kind of the world we're living in right now. We've created this world, but we feel as if we didn't volunteer for it, that it's just being foisted upon us. And that's our detachment from the higher perspective of our personal drama. And it's up to us to redeem this. That's my understanding.
I don't know what was up with the laptop then. Oh, that was ominous. You think the show's running out of time? Maybe yes, maybe no. I hope not.
I think Western civilization might be running out of time.
Oh no, that's gone. That's gone. I wonder what comes next. I hope it's interesting. It could revive, but nobody seems interested in reviving it, which is why we all need this meeting of unrepentant idealists and transcendentalists in Sedona. The gauntlet's down. Someone out there arrange it. I and my partner need a rock house and talk about pyramids and crystals and make a bit of money selling Solomon's ultimate lip balm. So I'm quite willing to do business. I'm open to suggestions, bar mitzvahs, corporate dues, anything to keep the flag flying. No, we need a talk. We need to get together, and we never lose faith. Faith is, I don't know what people think faith is. It's an extraordinary element in human life that might actually lead to goodness, beauty, and truth if we give it half a chance. Gosh, yes, the laptop is doing all sorts of weird things at the moment. I don't know what it's doing. Where do we go? I am rather, yes, John, but I can't hear you.
Oh, I said I'm astounded that you're running out of things to say.
Oh no, you know I'm not running out of things to say. It's putting them in the right order. It's putting them in the right order.
Ah,
Um,
yeah, doing it justice.
oh, was this has been a skittish show. It's a very good show. Yeah, panels of people telling each other how great they are. I mean, anyone that thinks the mystery and puzzle of the universe is tantamount to solved needs to grow up. Um, and the trouble with even the materialist sciences is that there are different ways of doing science. I mean, as I say, I'm very proud to call Professor Raymond Tallis a friend of mine. He is officially an atheist. He's one of the world's savants. He's a very knowledgeable man. He's a very clever man.
Is he any relation to Thomas Tallis, the composer?
Do you know? I've never asked him. I'll have to ask that.
Okay.
Because it's just never, because you can't get a word in edgeways. If you think I'm bad, you ought to meet him. A genuine humanitarian, an extremely bright guy. I mean, he's on new. I don't know, a program that won't exist in the American consciousness. BBC One, BBC Two, and BBC One Newsnight Review, which was a cultural interlude about 11 at midnight. It used to be every Friday evening. And if anybody wanted to talk about science and the producers thought they didn't, thank you, Mr. Boston, I could see that one. I think, yeah, but wasn't it Socrates that said, he knew nothing, which of course is a sort of a bit of an irony there. He was the wisest of men because of that. That's John.
The way I remember it is just a paraphrase. I know one thing, and that is that I know nothing.
Yeah, but even that's an ironic statement. Right. As I say, I've got a loose connection with the Cambridge atheists, which I'm very proud of. When Billy Graham made his last tour here, I was so rude that they made me an honorary member of the Cambridge Atheists. And it's not necessarily about what he's saying, it's about the way he's saying it. And Billy, you're an interesting guy, but a great deal of the planet doesn't identify paradise with the American lifestyle. I'm sorry, that's just all there is to it. Including me, I'm British. So how does that affect me exactly? So it's not necessarily what he's saying, it's the attitude that came with that. I got to meet Ray because I wrote a poem about him, and it was to do with these appearances on Newsnight Review. As I say, when one of the producers thought somebody was getting uppity in the sciences, they'd written a novel or there was some sort of, a series of articles somewhere. Professor Tallis would be wheeled out the closet to destroy them. 5 minutes later, they were destroyed, and he was wheeled back into the closet again. That was his function on BBC One. He's funny, he's intelligent, he's a humanist. I don't mind humanists. Some of them are incredibly decent people. He believes in the future. He doesn't think Rupert Sheldrake should be shut up. He doesn't think he's right in his solutions. He thinks he's got an uncanny knack of identifying weaknesses in present day science. How about that for enlightened attitudes? And thinks everyone should be allowed their say and we grow into a greater humanity through knowledge and love. My God, how could you shut someone like that up? And he would love this show. He would love this show. Therefore, we've got to be more mindful. Maybe that this little nasty meeting in, was it Arizona, doesn't represent the whole field of people who think that. And maybe they themselves need to get a grip and realize there are wider perspectives to everything, particularly because there are different ways of doing science no matter who you are. John.
Oh, I'm not on mute. Okay. I'm probably sitting here making all kinds of noises, which is okay. That there's a place for that too. And yeah, well, it's interesting because you get people that proclaim they're atheists, okay? meaning they know that that's their position. Whereas somebody who's an agnostic, they're saying, well, I don't know. It's the jury's still out. And I like that. I can respect the jury's still out more heartily than I can respect that they have finalized their opinion on the matter, as if they've already received all the information that's available. And so, and that being said, I'm not afraid of being exposed to those types of writings. I got a nice collection here of Darwinian authors that I think I'll wrestle down at some point to bring into our conversation, because there's a lot to be found there. It's just a question of to approach things conclusively, as if there's some kind of finality in one's statements, and that's the finality in Socrates. Is I know one thing, is that I know nothing. That I can accept, because that's a finality of openness, meaning that he's still working on it. It's a work in progress, I guess, is all we need to say about this. And that being said, so given that this is a work in progress, maybe Reverend David could come up with some form of prayer to consecrate this offering, however ramshackled it was today.
Well, I thought today was quite good, but I quite like ramshackled. I've been quickly looking up a quote by Fulton Sheen, who had a lot to say about atheists. He basically thought people were atheists because there might be something to make their egotism accountable. Their egotism and their sense of I'll do whatever I want, accountable to something higher. So that he thought a lot of atheism actually came from that. This is the quote I found. An atheist is a man who has no invisible means of support. I sort of quite like that one. Do you want to say something, John? I don't know what that means.
Yeah, all he's saying is that he's saying this. That people are enjoying this. And I guess the less formal we are, the easier it sits with people, and that's okay. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I like people calling me bishop when there's an absolute need and I can't wriggle out of it. But failing that, I don't really like it. My friends, I've had a blast today. I hope you have too. And whoever's threatening John has me to deal with as well. Back off. Yeah. So I don't know about it. I hope he'll tell me what the whole story is. I dread to think. But let's round off today with a few moments of reflection. It doesn't always have to be deep prayer. Let's a few moments of reflection. I'm thinking at the moment, as I have been all week, about Colossians. Not sure why. It's not always meet to focus on the four Gospels. There's so much material. It's overwhelming. Sometimes the rest of the New Testament needs to be looked at too, just to get a greater sense of perspective. What were people who met the apostles struggling with? I mean, I can't even imagine that as a contingency. What on earth would you do? But so I'm looking at Colossians. This is Colossians 1:16. And let's use that as our prayer today. For in him all things were created, things in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or powers or rulers or authorities, all things have been created through him and for him. My friends, let's all bless and wish each other well in the days ahead until we meet again. Let's remember we're all caught in a process called history. Let's remember we're all human and we're all fallible. And let's also remember that there's a light inside us that not only illumines the whole of the cosmos, but actually created it too. God bless you all.
Amen.